Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 158, Crashout Roulette. The more Shota thought about it, the less it all made sense. Inko Midoriya's quirk was a weak form of telekinesis, and his Zashi Midoriya's quirk was fire breath. If Izuku were to have a quirk, it would be pyrokinesis, surely. So where the hell did a strength enhancer come from, especially one so powerful? He would have written it off as infidelity on his mother's part, but the kid was somehow a carbon copy of both of them, at least physically. He had his mother's eyes and hair color, but the curls, freckles, and facial structure were undoubtedly that of his father. Genetics definitely did some weird things, and he was no biologist, but that really didn't add up. The thought had been niggling at him for a while, but Izuku's quirk and his mother's questionable fidelity hadn't been his primary focus in this case. Recent revelations had changed that, hence why he had his nose buried in Midoriya's files again at 2 a.m. He couldn't sleep. Of all the cryptic conversations that he had shared with Ivy, there was one that still didn't make sense to him. What did they mean when they were talking about a cure for a disability on that night? He had found them sitting on the ledge and lost in their thoughts. He had assumed that they were making the choice to train their quirk and damn the consequences, but broken bones weren't something you could hide. For months after that, they were up to something that Shota still didn't have answers to. As Shota flipped through his files for the millionth time, he finally noticed it. The quirk registration date was years off. The date on file was only a few months ago, in late November. That wasn't something that should have been recent. He had said his quirk was extant but unusable for most of his life, so it should still have been listed on his files. A thought occurred to him, one that he immediately dismissed due to how outrageous it was. But then he remembered that day in class when he had first sparred with Izuku and seen Ivy there in every movement. He had ignored his own intuition then, and it had come back to bite him. If there was one thing he learned about Izuku, it was that nothing was too improbable to be true when it came to him. Izuku was listed as quirkless. He had a near-complete mental breakdown about his identity and an apparent offer he had been given, and now he wasn't quirkless. Oh, sweet goodness, what did he do? Immediately, he slapped his Zashi awake and turned up the lamp from its lowest setting to its highest. What? I'm awake. What do you want? Zashi mumbled groggily as he squinted at him against the light of the lamp. Put your hearing aids in, Shota signed. He must have had a serious look in his eyes because Zashi whipped around and stuffed them in his ears immediately. What's going on, Sho? He asked with his voice still rough from sleep, but far more alert. Look at this. The quirk registration date. He pointed. What? That was only a few months ago. That can't be right. It's probably just a typo. What's got you so worked up about it? They asked. His old school thought he was quirkless. They should have been able to check the record and see that that wasn't true, but they couldn't because the record showed him as quirkless. He was quirkless. Do you remember that one night I found them crying on the roof? They were talking about an offer they'd gotten and some sort of disability. He watched the realization dawn on Zashi's face as he scrambled up until he was sitting next to Shota. What does that even mean? What did he do? How could he have... That's like mad scientist crazy shit, Shota. How could... Zashi cut himself off and the color drained from his face. Shota had the exact same realization at the exact same time. There's only one place he'd ever heard of a quirk being transferred from one person to another, and he still had nightmares about that thing at least once a week. Shota sprang up, sending papers flying across the floor to grab his phone on the far side of his nightstand. Sho, wait, who are you calling? The rat. There's no way a typo like this flew under his radar, and if we could put the pieces together, then so could he replied as he put the phone up to his ear. Sho, it's 2 a.m. Zashi tried to argue. The call went through regardless. What do you know about Midoriya that you're not telling me? Shota barked out the moment it connected. Zashi signed at him to put it on speaker, so he did. What do you mean, Aizawa? Nezu responded, having the nerve to sound just as put together as he always did. You know damn well what I mean. His quirk. It wasn't registered until last November. He clarified regardless. The question hung in the air for a tense moment before Nezu answered. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to say. I knew you'd find out eventually, and I believe you should be in the loop. But I would be betraying the trust of several people if I told you. I can bring it up to the relevant parties if you'd like, but it's not my information to give out as I wish, he responded diplomatically. What the hell is that supposed to mean? What do you mean, relevant parties? Who else knows about this? Hizashi demanded before Shota even got the chance. Oh, good evening, Yamada. Or rather, good morning now, I suppose. I can't tell you that either. You'll have to wait until they contact you. I'm not waiting for another second if my kid is still in danger, Nezu. Shota interrupted. He waited for reassurance that Izuku was safe, that he didn't make a deal with the boogeyman. But all he heard was a tired sigh from the other end of the line. Nezu, is he still in danger? He demanded. The following silence was more than enough of a response. I will contact the relevant parties presently. Get some rest, gentlemen. Nezu finally replied before the line went dead. He couldn't say how long the two of them sat there frozen in silence after that. His mind was racing, and he couldn't even pick out a single thought to assign an emotion to. It was Hizashi who finally broke the silence. He was quirkless, they stated simply. Oh. That was obvious. If he didn't have a quirk until 8 months ago, then obviously that means he was quirkless. He was actually quirkless. It all made sense. It made sick, twisted, horrible sense. That's why he said he'd always been a target. That's why his mother abandoned someone as smart and sweet as him. That's why someone as dedicated as him had such middling control over their quirk. That's why he was so afraid of everyone and everything. And that's why Bakugo called him a null on the first day of classes. He meant it literally. This kid had never had anyone on his side his whole life, all because of the lack of a quirk. The world beat this brilliant kid down and manipulated him into believing it was his own fault, all because he didn't have a quirk. That kid did everything he did as Ivy without a quirk. Holy shit. He didn't sleep a wink that night, and he's pretty sure that Zashi didn't either. He was at least awake at 6:30 a.m. when both their phones lit up with a message from the rat, letting them know that someone will be by at 9 o'clock to explain the situation. Why the hell is Nezu sending some mysterious stranger to our apartment? They asked, sounding as tired as Shota felt. Hell if I know. I don't care. I just want answers, he responded back into the darkness of their room. Light was just barely starting to peek through the gap in the blackout curtains, but his eyes had long since adjusted to the dark, so he could see Hisashi rub a hand over his face and resign himself to their fate. Are they going to warn him? They asked. I know just as much as you do, he reminded them. I don't want to wake him. He sleeps less than you, Sho. Yamada, 6:34 a.m. Are they going to warn him, or are we just springing this on him over breakfast? Nedzu, 6:36 a.m. I will tell him to contact Midoriya beforehand. Right. Okay, screw this. I'm going to go make us coffee, Shota declared after reading the message. Toshinori's phone, ringing, woke him up and he squinted at it in the darkness of his bedroom. Incoming call from Nedzu. It was 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday. This did not bode well. Doing his best to keep his rising panic down, he cleared his throat and answered the call. Hello. Hello, Yagi. I apologize for the early call, but it seems as though Aizawa has reached a bit of a breakthrough in Midoriya's case. He has questions, ones that I cannot answer for you. Nedzu got right into it. Oh. I believe Detective Tsukachi talked with you about this inevitability. Well, the day has come. I would appreciate it if you could make the time to meet with Aizawa and Yamada as soon as possible, as I'd rather not be on the receiving end of their wrath any more than I need to be. He continued pleasantly, his tone juxtaposing his words, as if that would soften the blow. Oh, gosh. I will send you their address. Since Midoriya is already there, it should make things easier for most everyone involved. Nedzu kept talking. Wait, what? His scrambled mind finally spat out words. I'm afraid we have used up all the waiting we had, Yagi. I have sent you the address for the Yamada Aizawa Midoriya household. You are to report there and answer their questions expediently. I have told them 9 o'clock. I'm sure that's more than enough time to get ready and make your way over. Nedzu bulldozed through his questions. It would be best to give the boy some forewarning as well. Perhaps a call on your way over? Nedzu suggested in a way that made it clear it was an order rather than a suggestion. Yes, all right. He trailed off and the line went dead. Shit. Izuku woke up to the sound of someone quietly rummaging around the kitchen. It was 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday. Why was someone up at 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday? He rolled over, pressed his pillow against his ears, and let out a quiet groan. He was sick of being tired. He just wanted to sleep. The anger he had boarded up in the basement of his mind was becoming more difficult to ignore as each day passed, and sleeping through it was so much easier. He did his best to continue, not analyzing where the root of all this bullshit was planted. But his mind seemed intent on plastering neon signs up at every instance of frustration in his memory. Mike was forcing him to see a damn counselor. One which he couldn't even tell the truth to, and Kachan successfully received his last get-out-of-jail-free card. Normally, he would just spend the night sprinting over rooftops or throwing knives hard enough to nearly pass through the cheap pine boards on his pallet-turned target, but he couldn't do that anymore. Sometimes it felt like he couldn't do anything anymore. The pillow wasn't helping. He should just get up. He wasn't going to get back to sleep at this rate. He tossed the pillow to the side and sat up in bed. It sounded like both Mike and Eraser were up now. They were quiet, though, so they were either signing or not talking at all. He could understand why Mike would be up. He knew they had trouble sleeping sometimes, but Eraser slept like the dead when he really wanted to. He was never up this early if he didn't have to be. Did they have a mission? Were they called in for something? It would be strange if both of them were called in for something so urgently. So if that were the case, it would have to have something to do with the League, since that was the only case they were both involved in. However, as the minutes ticked by, without any sort of sign that they were leaving, Izuku dismissed the idea. Did it have something to do with him then? Mike wasn't technically on his case as far as he knew, but he knew that Eraser kept him in the loop. Did they find his mother? He hoped not. That would really be the cherry on top of his foul mood. The silence continued on for hours. Neither of them had left to go anywhere, nor had they returned to bed. As far as he could tell, they were just sitting at the table, not saying a word. He did his best to distract himself from that. He didn't have much homework, but he finished what he had and started scrawling in his notebook again. He'd filled up 2 full books since moving in here. He had way too much free time on his hands, and it was all he could do to keep it from driving him crazy. Eraser was still patrolling uptown, and he hadn't gotten any news from either him or Iwai, who he finally ended up texting. He supposed no news was good news, but he would much rather see that for himself. The thought was one of the many causes of his burning rage, so he neatly tucked it into the back of his mind whenever it surfaced. It was nearly 9 o'clock when he was beginning to debate whether or not he should just go out there and see what the hell was going on. Of course, that was when his phone started ringing. Incoming call from AM. What the hell was going on? This could not be good. There was no way this was good. He answered the call before he could back himself out of it. Hello? His voice was a bit scratchy from disuse when he spoke. Hello, my boy. I'm going to be paying a visit. I'm on my way right now, actually. I'm almost there. All Might started awkwardly. He was nervous. Why was he nervous? Wait, why was he coming over? Why did he even know where over was? Izuku had never told him he was living here. Something must be wrong. What are you okay? He asked. Yes, I'm quite all right. Admittedly, a bit nervous. Nedzu called me earlier to let me know Aizawa-san had some questions for me. Questions about you, All Might explained. Oh, frick. Why does he have questions for you? My boy, it was only a matter of time before he found out. He's investigating your whole life, and if he's also your guardian now, then he should. No, he shouldn't. You said it was too dangerous, he interrupted. Somehow, the looming threat of All Might's secret arch-nemesis had been one of the few things he had not been spending his mental bandwidth on. He had gotten the information and promptly filed it away. He took the only thing he was capable of doing about it and kept that at the forefront of his mind. Don't let anyone know the truth. My boy, he's your guardian and your teacher. Plus, he's going to stumble his way into the truth eventually. Then we point him in a different direction. Dragging more people into this is the opposite of what you said to do, he insisted. He could hear All Might close the door to his truck. Damn it, was he already here? Oh, thank you, ma'am. He heard him speak to someone who wasn't Izuku, and the sound of another door shutting. I'm already here. I will be up in a second. Aizawa and Yamada are expecting me. Izuku heard the elevator ding over the phone. No, wait, let's think about this for a second. They don't need to be involved. It's out of our hands now. This is what has to be done, All Might insisted, and Izuku saw red. Out of our hands? Out of our hands? There wasn't a damn thing in his hands anymore. He didn't get a say in where he could go or when he could leave. He didn't have anything but these 4 borrowed walls and this one last godforsaken secret. All Might had said one for all was his now. What gave him the right to take that back? How dare he risk Mike and Eraser's safety over a few questions that Izuku could have redirected if he was only given the chance to? Of all the ways Shota expected this morning to start, Izuku slamming open his bedroom door with his phone pressed to his ear and storming to the front door at 8:52 a.m. was not on the list. He heard the front door slam open as well, but he couldn't see who or what was there from his seat at the dining table. He looked over at Zashi, who was already looking at him. They sat there, frozen in confusion, until they heard the kids shouting, at which point they both scrambled to their feet, sending their chairs skidding back across the floor. Why don't I get a say in this? You said it was my choice who to tell. Now, you can't just tell them, Izuku yelled at someone at the front door. My boy, please. They already... Yagi? The two of them said in perfect unison as they rounded the corner. They both whipped their heads up toward them, and Izuku looked furious. Clearly, he was furious. He was shouting at All Might in their Genkan. The last time he'd seen Izuku this angry, he was dangling someone off the side of a building. How about we come in and not involve the neighbors in this? Hizashi suggested gently. Yagi had to nudge Izuku aside to get in because he refused to move. No, get out. You two go back to the kitchen, Izuku instructed all three of them. He was acting like Ivy. He was finally acting like Ivy again, and Shota was far from relieved by that as he could be. Yagi looked completely bewildered. The kid had clearly never spoken to him like this before. He had managed to wrestle the door shut behind himself, and that was good enough for Shota. No, kid, we're not leaving. Yagi, what the hell is going on? He demanded. Yagi shot another concerned glance down at the kid, still trying to bodily shove him out of the door instead of responding. Stop! This doesn't concern you! Stay out of it! Izuku spat back in Shota and Hizashi's direction. Yagi looked aghast that Izuku was speaking to any of them like this, but Shota just rolled his eyes. If it concerns you, it concerns us, kid. He shot back unfazed. No, it doesn't, he insisted. Young Midoriya, what has gotten into you? Yagi finally questioned. Nothing, get out, he barked back. He tried to grab the door handle behind Yagi's back, but Yagi just grabbed Izuku by the biceps, picked him up like a misbehaving puppy, and carried him quite literally kicking and screaming past the Genkan so he could take his shoes off. Midoriya, this is bigger than either of us knew. Please, for your safety. Screw my safety! What about them? They didn't sign up for this! My boy, you didn't sign up for this, Yagi responded calmly after wiping a shocked expression off of his face. Kiddo, we signed up for anything having to do with you. If it concerns your safety, then we need to know, Hizashi added just as calmly as Yagi had. No, you guys have no idea what you're talking about, and it needs to stay that way, he insisted before turning back to Yagi. And you said that it was my choice now, and I don't want them to have anything to do with it. Midoriya, it's too dangerous. That's why I don't want them to have anything to do with it! Izuku cut him off. Shota was suddenly very thankful that they'd gotten the apartment soundproofed enough to dampen Hizashi's occasional quirk-enhanced snoring, because Izuku was genuinely yelling now, not just raising his voice. Midoriya, enough. I'm sorry, but you don't have a choice in this. Shota finally cut in. If looks could kill, he would be a dead man. The kid was glaring at him with everything he had. When he shifted his glare back over to All Might, he saw the man cringe and squirm before he turned on his heel, walked out the front door, and slammed it behind him, causing the door frame to rattle and crack up the drywall. Yagi just stood there, shell-shocked. What the hell is going on, Yagi? What did you get him caught up in? Shota demanded without giving him a moment to process this side of Izuku that he'd never seen. Hizashi put a hand on his shoulder to try and calm him down, but he just shrugged it off. What's he so scared of that he thinks he needs to protect us from it? He pressed. Yagi looked halfway to a crisis, but he couldn't give less of a shit right now. I don't even know where to start. He finally spat out, the beginning. Shota responded dryly. It's really not that simple, Aizawa, he said. He was clearly trying to figure out how to explain what he needed to say, but Shota's patience had run out several hours ago. When did you meet Midoriya? He asked. Maybe if he dumbed it down, he could get some damn information. About a year ago now, he replied. How? Shota shot back before Yagi had even finished his statement. Why don't you let him take his shoes off, Sho? Hizashi butted in. He can talk and take his shoes off at the same time. He's a talented man. I believe in him. Answer the question, he snipped, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I was after a villain. He'd escaped through the sewers and attacked young Midoriya. He started as he kicked off his shoes with one hand braced on the wall for balance. I caught up to him and took care of it, but my time was running out, and Midoriya had a question. I tried to get away, but he saw this, he said as he gestured towards himself and paused for a moment, worrying his lip before continuing. I had the villain caught in a bottle, and somewhere along the way I must have dropped it. He trailed off and looked between the two of them. Why don't we sit down? This is rather a long story, he said as he awkwardly scratched the nape of his neck. Shota turned on his heel and left Hizashi to be the good host and led Yagi to the living room. He was fuming. This attack wasn't on Midoriya's file at all. If All Might did his damn job properly, they could have looked past the surface level and gotten that kid off the street ages ago, but he didn't. Shota had a feeling that there were a lot of things he should have done, but didn't. Shota sat in his spot on the couch as patiently as he could, while Hizashi offered tea, which Yagi politely refused. When they'd all settled down, Shota looked at him expectantly until he continued where he left off. Okay, so the villain got away, and I'm sure you saw this part on the news, but he went after another kid, one of young Midoriya's classmates, Bakugo. They were setting off explosions everywhere, and the responding heroes couldn't, or didn't, get close enough to do anything, and I was out of time. But Midoriya ran in there to save him. He did save him. It was remarkable, he said with a wistful smile. All right, that seems pretty par for the course for him. How did this end up with him getting a quirk? Hizashi chirped, trying to simultaneously lighten the mood and get some answers. Shota could see that his patience was failing him as well. His shoulders were tense and his smile was completely fake. That was his present Mike smile, the one he plastered on for the paparazzi to keep up appearances. That was something he was sure All Might would pick up on. The thought almost made him laugh. Zashi could be a passive-aggressive little shit when he wanted to be. Yes, well, I suppose this is where I'll have to start at the beginning. All right. At the dawn of the age of quirks, there was a man who had the power to give and take quirks as he pleased. His power was called All for One, and as time went on, the power became synonymous with him. He amassed a following and ruled over the lawless land that the chaos that the emergence of quirks created. He was too powerful for anyone to stop, but his brother never bowed to him. He was sickly and quirkless, but he refused to back down. All for One tried to gift him a stockpiling quirk so that he could become stronger and be indebted to him by gratitude. But it didn't work. Neither of them knew at the time, but the brother wasn't actually quirkless. He had a useless power that allowed him only to pass on a quirk. But when that fused with the stockpiling quirk that All for One forced on him, it became something much stronger, and this power was called One for All. This power could be passed down by its user, gaining strength with each wielder in the hopes that one day it would be enough to defeat All for One. The quirk passed through 7 wielders, most of which died at All for One's hand before it was strong enough to defeat him. Or at least I thought it was. Yagi trailed off and scrubbed his face with his hands. Shota could see where this was going, and he didn't like it one bit. This had to be a joke. There's no way he was being serious, right? I am the 8th wielder, and I got this injury when I thought I'd taken down All for One, he said as he gestured to his side. But with the Nomu and the League, we believe that he's still out there. He finished, leaving them to put 2 and 2 together on their own. He wasn't kidding, was he? Shota was so mad that he didn't even know what to say. He looked over to Hizashi and, oh, oh no. Hizashi was furious. Tell me you're joking, Yagi, Hizashi stated coolly. I wish I was, Yagi said after huffing out a humorless laugh. Let me get this straight. Regardless of your secret immortal boogeyman of an arch nemesis, you offered a quirkless 14-year-old one of the most powerful quirks in the world. You didn't check in with his family. You didn't look into the clear signs of trauma. And you told him that telling anyone would put them in extreme danger. Their voice was as steely as Izuku's was right before he left. Yagi had the decency to cringe at that. Yes, I suppose I did, he admitted. Get out, Hizashi said, venom dripping from those 2 simple words. Yagi opened his mouth to argue, but seemingly thought better of it. No, wait. What aren't you telling us about the day of the attack? Shota butted in as Yagi went to stand. He remembered seeing Izuku that day. He was devastated. He was confused, and he had said that leaders in the industry told him he could never reach a goal because of his disability. And Shota was about to send Yagi out of here on a damn stretcher if that meant what he thought it did. The guilty look on Yagi's face didn't bode well for him. Yagi, what the hell did you say to him? He pressed. It wasn't my proudest moment. He asked me if he could. He cut himself off, buried his face in his hands, and dragged his fingers up through his tangled hair before continuing. He asked me if he could still be a hero if he didn't have a quirk, and he cut himself off again. Shota couldn't put into words how furious he was. His mind went completely blank with it for a moment before sensation returned to him. He shot to his feet and tried to calm himself before speaking, but it didn't do any good. You told a homeless, quirkless, suicidal 14-year-old that he couldn't be a hero without a quirk, then offered him yours? How the flip could you expect him to say no to that, you manipulative bastard? Zashi had a firm grip on his shoulder to keep him from outright attacking the number one hero in the middle of their living room. They weren't any calmer than he was. The devastated look on Yagi's face must have been enough to hold them back, but Shota wasn't nearly as empathetic as they were. Suicidal? Yagi finally asked, and he sounded heartbroken. He looked grief-stricken, but Shota didn't care. I found them crying on the ledge of a damn rooftop that night. Do you know how many times I almost lost them? Do you know how much your words mean? You're the number one freaking hero. Oh my! It's a damn miracle that that kid is still alive right now. He raged at him. Hizashi was fully pulling him back now, doing their best to hug him to their chest as Yagi sat slack-jawed and crying in one of their love seats. Shota, that's enough, Zashi stated firmly. You knew him before. I don't understand, Yagi asked, his voice small and trembling. Shota did his best to pull himself together at that. He was giving away information that wasn't his to give. No matter how much All Might deserved to suffer with the full knowledge of what he'd done, it wasn't his place to say, and he'd already gone too far. Zashi was right. The sound of the front door opening caught everyone's attention. They all stood rooted in place as Izuku rounded the corner, his feet still bare and covered in dirt. He looked like he had gotten his anger under control. He looked scared again, and the sight that greeted him in their living room probably didn't help that much. His gaze flicked from Yagi crying to Shota's still shaking fists to Hizashi bodily restraining him from attacking, and he took half a step back before pausing. What? He trailed off. Yagi was the first to break the silence. Midoriya, my boy, No, you're not speaking to him, Yagi. Get out. I think we could all use some time to process that. Hizashi interrupted. Could you go to your room, please, kiddo? He asked in a far more gentle tone. Izuku looked like a deer caught in headlights. He could imagine the kid didn't have a very good track record with angry adults in his home, so he did his best to hide the rage in his eyes and calmly stepped out of Zashi's grip on him. Hizashi must have caught on too because he let him. Midoriya, kiddo, it's okay. Everyone's just upset about the situation, but it's going to be okay. We're going to figure all this out. Why don't we go wash off your feet, actually? They look a little dirty, they said as they calmly walked over to him and telegraphed their movements before setting a hand on his shoulder to guide him to the bathroom. Izuku sent a concerned look back over to Yagi and himself before he let Zashi guide him away. Shota took a few deep breaths before turning back to Yagi. He was still sitting shell-shocked, staring in the direction Izuku had left, but he looked up at Shota once he realized his attention had shifted back to him. Tears were still welling in his sunken eyes. Aizawa, what do you mean? No. You don't get to know about any of that, and frankly, it's none of your business. I shouldn't have said that. Just forget it and leave. He interrupted. Yagi reluctantly got up on unsteady legs without argument and made his way to the door. Shota didn't bother seeing him out. He just collapsed back onto the couch and buried his hands in his hair. This was such a mess. End of chapter.